Uh, Hello. We're live, so I'm giving this a moment in case anybody joins. We're going to be talking about week 3's update for the Tharn CID, and we had some spicy updates this week. I think I said that last week too, though. My stream health is showing is yellow on YouTube, but my OBS is showing screen. So I'm gonna hope that everything's actually going just fine there. Yeah, we will get boo bad theme benefit coming through fine. All right, we got Will. That's usually who we get. So anybody else who joins in, feel free to throw questions out. I'm going to go through kind of in the dev notes, and we'll talk about my feelings on it. I'll answer some other questions as they come up. Obviously, if you catch this later, we will I'll be willing to talk about that. I've been pretty active in Discord the past couple weeks talking about stuff. I've sort of eschewed having too many conversations on the Circle Facebook group, but I'm not disappointed. I've sort of eschewed having discussions on the Circle Facebook group because of, frankly, there's just a lot more salt there, and it feels like the conversation gets really distracted really quickly. That happens in Discord too, to be honest, but the general Discord, my Discord is actually pretty good, but we're not, there's fewer people, so it's not as active. Anyways, let's just go through this. I'm going to talk through stuff. These tend to get a little long. If you have questions, though, as I go along, throw them in there. If I miss it, I'll try to come back. I'll have some time at the end, too. You can ask some general questions. If you're on the chat, like I said, I'll field any other questions later. So starting off, Iona the Unseen, they made a slight change to her feat. It was supposed to be this way last week, where they changed it so that rerolled the friendly faction warrior models can reroll missed attack rolls. Last week it just said friendly, and that was just not intentional. This happens pretty commonly with the developers. They're not too they definitely try to catch these typos, and the CID is actually really useful for those getting caught before they're in the game live. So I kind of like that aspect of CID, and I suspect they do too. But they're sort of thinking about the implications, and sometimes you got to go back and do some proofreading, and that's fine. The other change is Abattoir is changed to cost 2. That's fine. It's obviously a buff. I don't think either of these changes really make essentially any difference whatsoever. I've played 3 Iona games, and frankly, I'd like to play more. I'm really excited about her, but I don't think this changes. From my experience, this isn't going to change anything she does, and I don't think this is going to change. Let me move this a little less clear from that window. Yeah. Sorry, team. There we go. I don't really think this changes what her game plan is. I don't think this really changes anything. I haven't been in a situation currently where I've put my beasts in a position where this spell had any work. I've also talked with a few people about this in a few places, but my suspicion right now, at least this is how my game's played, and I suspect this is how a lot of other people's games played, is that people are used to playing a certain way against Circle. They're not really used to playing against Circle with more infantry. They're definitely not used to playing against Tharn. And so a lot of people talking about Iona being uninteractive is frankly that, like, this feat is sort of, it's not as strong as, but it's sort of in a similar category to somebody like Denegra 1, where the way you beat Denegra 1 is, unless you get like an early assassination or something, is to not lose too much stuff on her feet, and or sort of like be prepared to have a defensive feat that you can time out correctly or follow up with, or a control feat, things like that. Like Haley 2 used to be similar to this when she feeded on everybody. Like, you had the like movement part as that, but you basically need to have some stuff left you want to this like, so if you're playing against this, and hopefully not too many people watch this who want to do this, but like if you're playing against her, if you like, you know this is a strong feat, like you know that Tharn are going to hit you really hard, you know that like everything in her list is going to be decently tanky and hit really hard, and if you walk into that, it's going to happen and she's going to smash you. You need to be able to play in a way that you're going to be able to like stagger, unless you have specific tech that's really strong into some of these things, like if you can stop charges and things like that, great. Otherwise though, you're going to need to be able to like know like, oh, these Tharn are coming in here and I need them, like I need to prepare for that. You need to not feed your whole army into the Tharn when they're about to do that, and if you do, she's going to win. And if you do that, she's also not really going to need to leverage anything other than possibly Surefoot and maybe Pursuit to make sure that she can do that. A Hunter's Mark will help you ensure it. Pursuit is a much better late game spell, generally speaking, because it means if they're down to just melee pieces, usually it means that you literally can't kill at least her, possibly her whole battle group. And Abattoir is just a spell that has some niche uses. I think it's actually pretty clever, but I haven't used it yet. So I think a lot of the interactivity complaints with her, I think, unfortunately, it's sort of bad for a CID. This is sort of sometimes when CID, in my opinion, fails a little bit, which is that a lot of the times you need a bunch of games with somebody to really see like why there's extra, like some of these extra things that are out there are there, or why they're not there. Because you know, like if Iona needs to play a longer game than say turn 3, turn 4, turn 2 to 4, then Pursuit, Hunter's Mark, and a few other things are definitely going to start to come up. And if she doesn't, then, you know, if she basically kills 2/3 to 3/4 of their army by the time her feat resolves or shortly thereafter, like she doesn't really need to do anything else. So yeah, she's going to feel like she's not interacting, but like you're winning. So I think that's probably fine. Anyways, that's enough I know. I'm still really, really hype on her. I'm looking forward to playing a lot of games with her. I will probably be testing games with her even post CID with whatever her last set of rules are, in preparation for when she's coming out. So next changes, we start to get a little bit more interesting after this. So I actually spent, you know, a few minutes on a caster on some changes that aren't that interesting, but we get to Morvana the Autumn Blade. So they talk about this. Both of these were actually player suggestions. So she picked up Mortality, and so for anybody who doesn't know, that's a 3-cost range 10 non-upkeep spell. Target model/unit suffers -2 defense and armor, loses tough, cannot have damage removed from it, lasts for 1 round. Super powerful spell and a super like appropriate spell for Morvana. So I really like this. And then Regrowth and Restoration sort of like merge to be one spell. So target friendly faction unit gets +2 armor. They're not affected out of formation. During control phase, she can spend Fury to return a small or medium base living grunt with per Fury with 1 box, and they don't get a combat action. So this is kind of interesting because now it sort of makes this like unit that you're bringing back a little bit more tanky. I think it leans that spell a little bit harder on the male Tharn, to be totally honest, but that doesn't make it terrible on the Lady Tharns. It makes them it makes for a pretty interesting interaction outside of this theme also. Like I think it's good on Skinwalkers, for example. It's probably interesting on Wolves of Warbros. It's fine on Druids. It does help them in the like one thing that they have trouble with a lot of times, it's just blast damage. But what I think, and it also sort of sets up this interesting positional game, right, where before the unit that you had this on sort of like it would possibly get ignored. So now what you can kind of do is if you stagger, and I'll have to play this to see, but if you can, and I don't know what I'll have time to play exactly, just to caveat that, if you can stagger sort of how you're approaching it, right? So let's just talk Ravagers. Let's say it's Ravagers for a minute. And you put this on the first unit of Ravagers, and that unit is essentially intended to just like be the first wave that hits. So you're going to take and keep, let's say, 2 of them back so that you can actually get the benefit of the recursion factor out of her, and then send in, like I said, like, you know, 4 or 5 of them in to do some work and be in a threatening place. Well, now those are going to be pretty hard to kill. But if they're the ones threatening, they're probably still going to get killed, but your opponent's going to spend a bunch of effort doing so, right? And you can have your other unit, let's say you have 2 units of Ravagers in my example, right? You have your other unit back a little bit, and sort of like that unit dies, you regrow those units with your Fury at the beginning of the turn. So now that unit's back up to full. Then you cycle that spell over to the other unit, send that in, and again, you can sort of continue to do this throughout the game, potentially, where, you know, you're like putting the unit, like, tagging in and out of the game. And even though you can't bring the, what's the little guy? The Stone Shaper, being able to put mortality out from Geomancy is actually very strong. Arguably too strong from some people. I don't think it's too strong. But the thing with her casting that spell is there's a lot kind of going on for her to be able to actually do that. So her attack spell is actually pretty strong. Eruption of Life. So you're sort of and there's just a lot of choices that need to be made here, right? So are you going to cast are you going to cycle Restoration, because that's going to cost you 2 Fury? Are you actually putting dudes back in play from Restoration, because now you've spent you know, you've upkept Harvest, you upkept Restoration, that's 2 of your stack. Now you're going to put back 4 or 5 dudes, so now you're sitting on somewhere between 0 and 2 Fury. And if you don't actually get some kills from Harvest, or that you can use Harvest to get Fury back, she's not going to actually even have any Fury to cast Mortality. So I think that's why they're kind of okay with the spell. Like, it sounds really powerful, and it is. It's a very good spell. But you're going to have to really try to see how you leverage it. But having Brenos as an Arc Node is going to be very big for her. I think she has 3 spells at a range 10, and then add Brenos to sort of extend that in various ways. On top of the fact that she's honestly just pretty survivable. As long as she stays out of melee ranges. She's not... Brenos' Animus, again, you're going to have to choose like where your Fury is being used, but if you're worried about a spell assassination, either you have Brenos like stand in front of her with his Animus up, or you put her... She just makes the determination to put that Animus up, and she's immune to spells that are being channeled. If they are going to try to shoot, you try to make sure that you have sack pawns that are there, which we have plenty of good options for. If you happen to play her in Secret Masters with Druids, you have even better sack pawns, because you just keep a Druid back there who's immune to every element every turn, and then like she's immune to every type of elemental damage also. So I think Morvana 1 is going to be one of the surprising... It's sort of like... I'm sort of wondering if Morvana 1 is going to come out of the CID the way that... who am I trying to say here? The way that Malok came out of the Minions CID, where a lot of the time spent in the Minions CID was focused on Barnabas 2, and was talking about Jaga Jaga having Signs of Importance, testing the Dracodile, things like that. There was a lot of things that were focused on, and then like everybody sort of coming out of that was like, oh, well, this is going to be like Jaga Jaga Rask or Jaga Jaga Barnabas 2 forever coming out of this. And then Malok ends up being kind of like the caster that everybody's concerned about. And or that gets a lot of tournament play, I should say, and that's a lot because a couple players looked at that and were like, "Oh, this is going to be a pain for people to play into." So, but again, Morvana might be there. That said, she's still hurt by RFPs, so it depends on how much of that's out there in the game. And what I didn't mention is the other thing with Mortality is it's actually a fantastic spell if you're looking to leverage Blood Pack. Because now you can recur your Blood Pack if they get into awkward places, but mostly they can probably just reposition the entire game, and just like you throw Mortality out on stuff, and you get it with like Blood Trackers and the guys I just said, Blood Pack, and it's just going to be a pretty powerful interaction, I think. So very, very excited. I would say that this is probably fine. Like I don't think this is going to be too good to stick around. I could still see it changing, of course. It is testing, but yeah. So that's where Morvana lives. Related to Morvana, we'll just move right along. We have Brenos. Small change to Brenos. He's going to pick up Battle Wizard. I actually had talked about this. I don't know if I talked about it in a video, but I've talked about it in a few places. I know I've talked to my wife about it. But I was really happy to see some way for Brenos to contribute more than just either casting a spell or making attacks. There's some better versions of this. I don't know that they exist, but there's some other ways I personally would kind of like to see him work out. Going back to Morvana, I have a comment in the chat just saying that they feel like Morvana 1 is going to pair with a lot of Kruger 2 lists once people test her out. Maybe. I don't know that that's exactly where my pairing is, but I'm actually just trying to kind of test stuff and let CID sort of feel out what I'm feeling from CID, and then sort of the deeper analysis on like my approach is going to come later. But anyways, yeah, that's an interesting point. But back on Brenos, I like Battle Wizard. I think it moves in the direction of, he can cast his heal, he can, bop a couple things with his stick and cast his Animus, and then do the heal or anything like that. And if he's hanging back, he can obviously do a few different things. I personally would love to see an ability where he was like able to cast all of his spells in a turn. So like if he used a special action or attack, he could also then spend a Fury to use one of his other spells and one of his other spells, so he could cast all three in a turn if he wanted to spend 2 Fury or something like that. Just because I think that would make him feel a little bit more wizardy, because he's fine at hitting stuff with his stick, but like I just don't see that as his role. I see him as like this like spellcaster beast. But this is a good move in that direction, and if this is where he ends up, I think he'll be fine too. So I think you'll see him with Morvanas, and I think you'll see him possibly in some Call of the Wild lists if you're concerned about spells being channeled in your direction. So the stick being blessed is actually pretty important in some cases too. Anyways, that's all on Brenos for the time being. The Shadowhorn Satyr, they felt was overperforming in its role. I kind of expected this might happen, but so they're just moving it back to 12 points. I think that's fine. Elusive as an Animus is a massive upgrade for this guy, especially in Kaya 3 lists. And being another model that you can bring so that one of your Warbeast casters has access to that Animus. So I think that's good. And I think beat back on all the attacks is good. And then he gained Pathfinder. So he was okay at 12 before. Obviously at 11, it's party time. But at 12, I think he's still playable in the places he's playable. I've seen some people sort of complaining that it means you won't play Gnarlhorns. It might have only been one person, but I don't see any problem with them being the same point value. They're very different pieces. They do very different things. Gnarlhorn's more of a like you come to me piece, and the Shadowhorn's more of a I'm going to you piece to me. And they have different animi that do different things. So yeah. And honestly, I haven't tested this, but they should pair up together pretty well, where the Gnarlhorn now hits kind of hard enough that with somebody like somebody who can increase their damage, right? So the Shadowhorn goes out there, jumps, throws maybe throws something back, or maybe beat back twice and does this chain attack throw. And then the Gnarlhorn's there to be like, thanks, friend, and doesn't have to walk that far and just punches it in the face. So, I mean, maybe not. I don't know. That might be a lot of moving pieces. But anyways, I think this change to 12 points is fine. And this is the type of thing, just to soapbox a little bit, that this is the sort of thing you want to make sure that you're used to when there's a CID, which is that there are going to be things that aren't, they get dialed up and down throughout the CID, and where they end up is not necessarily going to be the most powerful version of something you got to test. And the next thing we talk about might be a really good example of not getting your expectations up too high. So I think the Shadowhorn is fine at 12. Pathfinder and the Animus beatback change is really good for him. So, anyways, the spiciest change of this entire page, and there's actually kind of a lot here, is the Storm Raptor. So they are basically testing some what I would call pretty aggressive changes. I know from what I've read, people are of a little bit of mixed feelings about this, and we'll maybe, this would be if there are questions here, this will definitely be one of the ones I wouldn't mind focusing more on. So feel free. But the first change of Skyfire lasts for 1 round. I expected that after last week. I think once a few people pointed out that Plasma Nimbus wasn't getting the animi, that didn't make sense. So good change. Lightning goes to range 14, so that's the name of the gun. It's the most boring name of a gun ever. It's just called Lightning, but whatever. The only thing more boring would be if we called it Gun. But range 14 is good. That's an obvious buff, right? It's range 12 now. Going up to range 14 means it can... so now it's a range 14, POW 14. Can contribute a pretty long ways away. Like, POW 14, 15 is sort of the, tippy top of most guns. There's a few that tip into the 16. And, a couple that go... Maybe one that goes above that. Without buffs and stuff outside of that. So... it's still a pretty good gun, even if you don't get even if you're not in range for Skyfire. I think that's fine. It loses Lightning Generator, so that's the rule that gives it the D3 leaps. Lightning gains the Energy Pulse, Special Attack, and Sustained Attack. So I'm going to talk about Sustained first. If you're not familiar, that basically means... that the range attacks automatically hit. And then he has Energy Pulse, which is a special attack. This is the rule that's on Thunderhead, for those of for anybody who's familiar with it. This is anyways, this attack does not need a target. Each other model within 6 inches of this model that is in its front arc is automatically hit unless this model's line of sight to it is blocked by terrain. Models hit suffer a POW 12 electrical damage roll, and the rolls are simultaneous. Come back to that in a second. And then Reload 1 is replaced with Reload 2. So should be pretty obvious what that does. So just to touch on Reload real quick. Reload 2 is a little bit only because at Fury 4 you can't, so on the Glacier King it works out really well to have Reload 2 because you can get say boosted damage. So with somebody like Captain Gunbjorn, who can give it boosted attack rolls with his spells, he gets boosted. He can boost damage by boost, and we're short of boost. And that's assuming that we're going to Call the Wild. And then if you want the Animus, you're short a boost or a buy, one of the two. Just a comment in the chat. Either non-circle players hate it and circle players are afraid of the nerf bat, are hesitant with the Thunder Chicken. These changes may convince me to buy one. Okay, a little disjointed there, but that's alright. So these are pretty spicy changes. So Energy Pulse covers what is essentially a 17-inch diameter of the table. It's almost a 5-inch base. Wait, did I say that right? Yeah, 12 plus 5. So it's basically a 5-inch base with a 6-inch arc from that. So you're covering a 17-inch diameter, which is, if it was 18 inches, you'd basically be, you're approaching, you're not quite to covering the amount of space that like Madrak 1's control area would cover, with assuming it was the Fury 5 caster, Focus 5 caster covers only a little bit more area than that. And it is affected by his Animus. So it says POW 12, but that's POW 14. It is affected by anything that increases its damage. So Hand of Fate. That's the big one. I'm trying to think what else. Crystal Shadow's Mortality, both would help this, but obviously that's on specific targets. I thought there was one more when I was looking into it. Anyways, you get the idea. It is boostable, so there's no word in here that says you can't boost the damage rolls on this. So now we're talking about a boosted POW 14 that automatically hit, possibly. Also, the way this works is sustained attack means if you automatically hit with this attack, you can still buy more attacks with the gun that will hit automatically. So if you do it that order, you can do a POW 14 that auto hits, and then you could get 2 boosted POW 16s because you're auto hit, assuming you're in call and you get the animus for free. Or I didn't specify this, but we've been talking about the animi for free a lot, but your caster can go up connection here. So if hopefully it was just momentary there. So if you lost me a little bit there, sorry. Keep an eye on that. We'll try to keep speeding along. Anyways, this basically means, like, if you read this and don't see, like, ha, you brought infantry, that's cute, it's dead. Like, I don't know. Like, I read, like, reading this, you know, there might be some nuance to whether this is the right or, like, too powerful or not powerful enough or not the right choice for this model. But, like, if you read this and don't go, like, all infantry within 17, you know, in that arc that I just described is fried, and, like, they just can't drop it. And we're not talking about just every infantry, right? Like counter matchup, right? If you're playing against a bunch of Tharn, and this is dice -1, like, you're causing tough checks on literally everything that's in this area. If you're talking about Ogren, which are kind of a big deal right now, right? Like, they go up to armor, I think, 18 at most, and that's if they're in a Blightbringer order, they have another armor buff. Like, your Hand of Fate does 5 damage to an armor 18 thing if it automatically hits. With POW 14, I think it was a little over 50% of the time. And that's without boosting. So, you know, if you go up, cause a tough check on half of them, and then you just buy 2 shots and you can kill them. And then, not to mention, you still have Plasma Nimbus coming back in. Also, it's a Gargantuan, which means it can shoot in melee. So a lot of the things that Thunderhead sort of doesn't like is if he gets engaged at 2 inches, he can't use his energy pulse because he can't make a ranged attack because he's in melee. I don't think he has dual attack. The Storm Raptor doesn't have dual attack either, but he is a Gargantuan, so he can always make ranged attacks in melee. So there's that to consider. It also means that you have some interesting play where if they don't, at range 14, like, if they, and he has repo still, right? He still has the Scepter to be mobile. So if they don't come forward, you're just like, fine, I'll stay back and shoot you with POW 14s all game. Fine. If they do, then you're like, oh, okay, well, I'm gonna kill all your dudes, right? And if you're dealing with heavies, okay, his melee output is mediocre. Okay, we're back. Sorry for anybody whose stream was interrupted there. I seem to be having some spikes in latency or something. Hopefully, if there's a gap in the video there, I apologize. But anyways, Storm Raptor, this is really good. Covering this much of the area of the table with that rule seems... I joked about this being something I wanted to see on this, and didn't think it was ever possible, and so here we are testing it. It may still not be reasonable to have in the game, or it may not be reasonable to keep along with some of the other rules, or, you know, like, there's a lot of different ways that this is going to go. So I want to see... I'll be really interested to see battle reports. I don't know if I will get a time to test this week or anything, for a variety of reasons, but I'm really interested to see where this goes. Also, just I mean, like, the assassination threat on this is auto hitting caster and then just getting some big boosts, so you've always got that. Yeah. Moving right along, unless yeah, I don't see any questions. Don't think I lost any viewers there. So Bridget and Call are going to 7 points. They're happy with their output and turn by turn. Players feeling a little overcosted, and then with some changes we're going to get to below, They felt like going down a point makes sense. So 7 points. I'm okay with this. We'll talk about. I'll talk about them a little bit more with the change to the theme force below because I think that's the most relevant part. But at 7 before that theme change is about what I was hoping for. I will be interested to see. We'll talk more about them, but mostly I think I feel like I have not played them optimally yet in the 4 or 5 games I've played with them, and I'm going to need to spend some more time because I think they have a ton of potential for this theme force, more so than some other things. So, the Blood Reaver Night Witch gains advanced deployment. That's just like Blood Reavers can AD now with the attachment. Most people have been playing them with the attachment because of the CID. That's fine. I think that's a good change. I don't think it's worth having a lot of discussion about. AD good, nothing but a buff. I really like the Night Witch and where she's at. I really like, she's a really good viable option with the Well, which we'll also talk about. Lord of the Feast, again, along with some theme force changes, they're giving him back Blood Reaper. So we've essentially gone my show, and by that I mean full circle on this guy, only with more buffs. So in Mark 2, with the exception he used to be able to boost the Raven. So now he gets Blood Reaper is basically lets him. It's sort of like a non-special attack Thresher. So if he makes an initial attack with his sword, he can attack everything in his line of sight. He has 2-inch melee. He's speed 6. This puts him in a place where you can kind of interact with him in one of two ways. You can walk up, you can Raven something, hit it, attack everything within 2 inches of him. Great. And then, the hope there being that he loads up with corpses. Or you can charge something, do Blood Reaper, kill all the things with Blood Reaper, hopefully. Actually, with dual attack, it's not a hope anymore so much, but you kill as many things as you can there, and then you can Raven to somewhere else, Shifter, and then you can buy additional attacks. Note, you still cannot buy melee attacks and then go back to making your range attack. You can't do that. You can make your Blood Reaper attacks and then, or vice versa, but you can't. Once you start buying attacks, you don't get your initials anymore. This is great. If this all stays, if the theme stays like it is, which we'll talk about, and this stays, and honestly, even if it doesn't, I would love to see this stay the way that it is for that reason. And we'll talk more about that with the theme. But speed 6 with the death fueled, whatever that rule is, that he gets strength and armor with the corpses. Blood Reaper, I like where Lord of the Feast is, and I think this makes him really viable in both of the themes that he's played in, to be honest. The Well of Orboros, just an increase to 12 points from 10. I sort of saw this coming last week when they did 10, that I think they were trying to just be aggressive and get some people to play it a little bit more, to be totally honest. They're going to cost to 12 points. I think too many people railed against the fact that it felt like you were getting it for 5 points, which is, I've talked a lot about this. That's not how I see it. I'm concerned that I think 12 points is actually too much. Actually, let me back that up. I think 12 points is a good place for it to live, but I think if it's going to live there, that it needs some other tweaks still. And they say there's still a lot of discussion to be had on about the point cost and stuff. So personally, I'm not enamored at all with the Wold benefit. I think it's almost entirely fluff and not like. I'm sure it will come up. There'll be some game where somebody uses it and it makes a huge difference, and maybe I'll have one game one time sometime where that happens. But overall, I'm just that benefit's meh. The extended control area is actually really good, obviously, but it's not good enough. Nothing's really changed with my evaluation of this, right? The extended control area is a really good benefit. It's not enough of a reason by itself, generally, to bring the Well. The gun is really good, but it's super limited by where the model can deploy. And it's one of the things that it does that's really good is drops off corpses. So you need one of the themes that actually wants to have corpses. And it doesn't count for points in any of those themes, minus the fact that you can give themes to friendly models. So if you want to bring Shamblers in like your Secret Masters list, that's actually interesting at least. But I've seen some people talk about bringing shamblers to shoot it yourself so that you can make sure that you get corpses, so your models with corpses can get corpses. I don't love the notion of bringing 22 points that are not like contributing to doing stuff to my enemy just so that other models can do that. You know, if I see some battle reports, I'll be interested to read that. I don't think I will test that myself. I could be wrong on that approach, but that's sort of how I feel. So I'm not sure what it needs. I feel like it needs something. Like maybe instead of that wold benefit, it could heal or do some healing, or maybe there's an aura that does something else. Maybe it starts it doesn't really like start the game with corpses. I don't think that really fits its idea. I don't think the gun can really get much longer in range. It's already pretty far. Like if you go second, it's kind of going to be pretty far up. Comment, would rather the wold benefit be +1 or 2 speed to all wolds instead of hyper aggressive. I would love it for that to be the case. It's probably busted, sadly. Like speeding stuff up in circle is one of those things you have to be super careful about. Trying to think like what else it could do. There's probably other directions it could go, right? I've been looking at Warcraft 3 a lot lately, so I'm probably thinking of the well, like, oh, it should heal stuff. But so that doesn't have to be the only thing that it does either. But I personally would like to see it. If it's going to stay 12 points, and I think that might be the right point value for it, but I think it might just need another rule, a tweak of one of the current rules, some small change, etc. So more construct armor. No, more armor is probably not okay for Baldur. More defense is. It's such a delicate piece, right? Like in circle, this thing just this thing just has the potential, like it's so, there's so many different restrictive pieces of it that it's really hard to and it has a lot of flexibility with the free solo, so it's just really hard to figure out like dialing that piece in so that we see it on the table but it's not oppressive, because like more armor, more speed, probably things that are going to be oppressive. I don't think you can have it like teleport a unit in, because I think that's bonkers. That we don't really have stuff with the right point values to work that out. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not really sure. I don't think you can go more than 2 inches on a control area, because that's already really good. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe you could dispel enemy upkeeps, but I don't think that's really good enough on its own either. I don't know. I'll have to think about it a little bit and see if there's maybe a big problem is no one is testing it with wolds. I don't know if that's a big problem. I think a lot of people have highlighted the issue that they feel like with that benefit. I absolutely do encourage people to go out and throw this into a list with wolds and put some feedback out there for it. I have not done that because it's just not my priority right now. Like if this thing is not that great with wolds, I'm pretty indifferent. I just want it to. I'm just considering that benefit basically to be like Heart Eater on the Blood Pack, which is that it's there and it's cute, but who cares? Or I shouldn't say who cares, but like it's not its primary, like they're not really paying points for that. It's not one of the primary things that they're concerned with. Yeah. So, anyways, we'll see. I think we're gonna have more conversation on the well. Is character solo okay? I would say no, character solo is not okay. With the change to Lord of the Feast, even if he ends up needing to be 7 points instead of 6, and he's going to be free most of the time when you take him anyway, so it's sort of moot. But, like, no, I think surprise Lord of the Feast, like, in a list that isn't prepared for him is going to be maybe a bit too much. More to that point, I think Morag, especially if we ever get him buffed at all, is going to be too good. And Una 1 makes some nonsense happen that we just don't want that. So, no, I don't think so. So we'll see. Like it says here, I think there's more to talk about. We talked about it quite a bit here. I'm going to just move forward because the last piece is a pretty big deal, and then I'm going to wrap up before my internet decides to be nonsense more. I definitely don't see it teleporting in a minion. Just for if for no other reason, for fluff reasons. But I think a lot of minions, like having access to all the minions, is probably straight busted. I have to think about it, but probably. Anyways, I want to move to the last benefit really quick because I think there's a lot of discussion here, which is a big change. So I'm just going to read it. The change, I'm going to go through it. Basically, they want to take some of the spotlight off of the Death Wolves and allow other things to shine without players feeling like they're handicapping themselves. So the change is going to be, instead of the 10.1 corpse rule, each model in this army that can gain corpse tokens begins the game with 1 corpse token. So this means you're not fighting. I personally like this change with a couple exceptions, because it's linear in this case, right? So I'm not so heavily incentivized that, like, the more and more Tharn I put in the list, because I want to get as close to those 9 corpses, which is the most you could get. I think I haven't done the math since. No, I don't think that changes it. 90, you get 94. No, you don't get to 100 points of free stuff. So before, obviously you're trying to get to, that 20, 40, 60 to get a free card at each one of those paths in Tharn. But then you're also, like, trying to sort of play this mini game of, like, well, can I get to a point where I can get 3 corpses, so my Lord of the Feast is maxed out, or my Call is maxed out, or that I can get to, I sort of liked 5 a lot with the Death Wolves, or more than that, right? Like, if you get to 6, then you got Lord of the Feast and Bridge and Call, and you have places for them, or like you get to 3 for Chromac 2, etc., etc. And then usually what happened is you sort of, like, got as many as humanly possible, and you, like, threw them. You threw that out on the Death Wolves, and they just, like, what they did with them, honestly, was just be super tanky, and that's sort of interesting. There's a couple questions I'll go to after I go through my bit here, because I think they're important. This is a linear change, right? If I put a unit of Ravagers in, each Ravager gets a corpse. If I put the Death Wolves in, each of them gets a corpse. If I play a Chromac 2 list, he gets a corpse. If I bring Bridget and Call, this is one of the downsides, in my opinion. They get a corpse. Or Call gets a corpse. Bridget doesn't have them. So that one's unfortunate, because I think one of the biggest strengths of Call is him being able to get in there and make those 4 big attacks, along with her, like, 2 big attacks. So that's one of the places I'm a little spotty, and only because Call doesn't have really an efficient way to get more corpses on his own, that is. There's other ways to do it, but I'm trying to think what I've left out. Blood Pact gets to start with a corpse, but that's sort of not that big of a deal. The White Man gets a corpse. The Shaman gets a corpse, right? Like, these guys all get 1 corpse. It's all sort of uniform. I really like that now you're not like feeling bad, like, oh, well, I have these corpses, and if like, a lot of people didn't want to put them on Ravagers, because, like, oh, well, if I put them on the Death Wolves, at least I know in every game somebody's gonna, like, either not attack the Death Wolves because of it, or, like, will they'll either not attack the Death Wolves because of them having corpses, or they will, and they'll get value sort of in both ways. And Lord of the Feast, again, like, Lord of the Feast and Call were really high priorities to put in lists, because you're like, well, I'm getting these corpses, so they're going to go there. And so what I really like now is Ravagers are getting corpses, Solos are getting corpses. Everybody gets 1 corpse. Everybody can try to get use out of it. And you can feel like you sort of don't have this mental gap where you have to try to be like, well, I'm building a Tharn list, and even though I only, like, I'm putting corpses on these models, or I need to get this many Tharn, so my Death Wolves have this many corpses. And frankly, like, it just was sort of disheartening to me that while the Death Wolves are good, and Devourer's Host is the right place for them, because as the name implies, that I didn't really like that every list was sort of, and even for me, a lot of the lists I built was like, oh, well, obviously, like, find a way to put the Death Wolves in here, find a way to put the Death Wolves in here. And I think that is absolutely necessary to this theme to make that changes. And I know I read some developer comments earlier today that also did, I think it was Jason Souls who said this, sort of implying that even if this is determined not to be the right change, that the Death Wolves will probably see some changes based on their feedback so far if this doesn't work. I also like this change because it allows rules like Lord of the Feast to have Blood Reaper, right? So that he can get his own corpses. Because before I felt like he was super swingy on like, well, if I bring him and I load him up with corpses ahead of time, or I bring one of the things that can load him up with corpses, now he's going to be really strong. And if I don't, he's going to feel very meh. This now sort of puts it in a place where he's actually in a place where he can pick up corpses. He'll always have at least one he can use. It starts him off with the +1 armor and strength and armor, which is, and if you've seen Grimkin at all, it's a good way to start the game. I like this benefit ultimately. Now, a couple of comments, because they're sort of where I would have gone with this anyways, I think. One comment is, it's cute, the Spirit Cauldron, how it's written, and the well get corpses. So just a point of clarification there, the well does not get corpses. The well shoots, and the models killed produce corpse tokens that can be assigned, so it won't actually start with a corpse. Spirit Cauldron will, assuming they keep it as a friendly model and not friendly faction model. I expect them to make it friendly faction, but honestly, I think the only minion model that could start with a corpse is the Spirit Cauldron, and I by no means think that it's a bad thing for it to start. Like, I don't think it breaks this theme for it to start with a corpse. It's going to probably walk up, give itself D3 corpses, and assign that out on turn 1 anyways. So, it might, or it may hold on to them to do it on the next turn, but, like, I think that's perfectly fine, if that's how that goes through. Will comments to say his main objection is the same as in the Discord. Disincentivizes using female Tharn because they don't care about corpses. They also make up a majority of units in the theme. The only unit that really makes good use of one corpse on each model is Ravagers. So it's sort of 2 points. I hear you on the female Tharn. I actually had a big complaint about this ahead of time, corpses notwithstanding, that there were no benefits for the female Tharn at all. And then they added the Bloodweaver ambush rule, so there's at least a little bit there. I don't think the theme really needs to incentivize you to bring the female Tharn. I think their stat lines kind of do that on their own. And sure, now there's sort of this like corpse math you might do where you're like, well, if I were to bring 2 units of Ravagers and 2 White Mains and 2 Shamans, the Death Wolves, Lord of the Feast, like, I'm going to get the most corpses possible, and that's the most boosts I can get, or additional attacks, right? Might be something to that, might not be, I don't know. Or I don't know at this time anyways. I personally think, but if you look across a lot of theme forces, this is not that uncommon, right? Like, if you look at the Statixis theme, like, their solos get dodged or something, and it's still a really good theme, because the models in it are really good. I think the Blood Reavers are really good. I think the Blood Trackers are a really good place. I think the Wolf Riders are in a fine place. I think the Wolf Rider Champion's really good. I think the the Night Witch is really good. The Blood Shaman's really good. So, while yes, bringing female Tharn, like, don't directly get benefit from this, but that's true of a lot of theme forces, right? Like, if we go, trying to think, like, Exemplar Interdiction, for example, I don't think there's any, like, benefit similar to this corpse benefit, right? If you look at most of the theme, like, look at Wild Hunt, for example, which is built like sort of a classic theme. There's no benefit there. You get the 1 ambush unit, you get tracker on your beasts, right? None of those benefits are going to incentivize you to play a certain, Skinwalkers, for example, are not incentivized, right? Other than they exist in that theme, and maybe you'll play them, maybe you won't. In Primal Terrors, you get vengeance on your Ogryn units, I think, is the benefit. So, like, I guess they're incentivized, but there's no incentive to bring Rotwings, but you still are going to sometimes. Ultimately, like, I see the objection there, but I don't think, and maybe there's another, maybe there's a way they can change the benefits around to matter. For the Lady Tharn a little bit more, but I think if they don't, that the theme is still probably in a much better place with this change. And the only thing that it does make me want to make sure, like, most ideally make sure of, is that call Bridget and Call are getting more testing, because I think it feels to me like that's the one really that's the big downside I'm feeling here, is he's just like, Ravagers have an out of activation way to get corpses, White Mane has an out of activation way to get corpses, Lord of the Feast has multiple attacks to get corpses, Call has no additional way to get corpses. So like, are you playing them and then bringing the well? Are you playing them and then bringing the Spirit Cauldron? Are you just hoping that like a dude dirtles by and he gets 1 kill, and so later in the game he has 2 or 3 corpses? Don't love any of that. So, just something to consider there. And then I wish they had started the CID with this benefit, because I think we would have spent a lot more time honing that in. So, but I have a whole 8 live viewers. So if anybody has any questions, it doesn't have to just be with the changes, about how CID is going, how my games are going. I have posted, I think 3 or 4 battle reports at this point. I've played a couple extra games. That one, I just posted some feedback directly to the portal. Another one, I got like a turn 2 assassination, so I didn't post it. But Iona had a Wolf Rider champ just jump behind Colgrima and killed her in 2 attacks. So yeah. Anyways, we're getting closer to an hour here than I had sort of expected I would, but I will give a couple minutes for anybody if they have any questions. This is where I wait and see what y'all have to ask. And if you don't, then we'll call it a cast, and we'll talk more about it another time. I don't have Jeopardy music to play though. It'll be perfect. Except then YouTube would probably kick me off for having copyrighted stuff. Una 2 double Raptors for the win. Maybe. Seems interesting. I know a lot of people are actually talking about Kruger 2 with the Storm Raptor right now with the change. Double with him might be interesting too. Don't know. Yeah, mostly joking. The only thing I don't like with Una 2 with 2 Storm Raptors actually is just how the points work out, because I think you would only end up with like 4 Scarsfell Griffins after that, or something like that. It might be fine. It just like looks really weird to me. I'm also concerned that you might have some issues where if like you have a couple really juicy targets that if they can get to, you're just gonna have a bad time. And you can't put your Scarsfell Griffins in front of your Storm Raptors, because turns out auto hitting POW 14s is bad. Okay, so I'm gonna wrap this up. Like I said, I'm approaching much more closer to an hour than I was hoping. So, thanks again for everybody for tuning in. As always, if you like the video, thumbs up, throw it out on social media, tell your friends, tell your family. I don't care. I'll talk to any of them. If you have more questions, throw it in my Discord or on the Facebook group, on Twitter, at Cheddar Caveman there. I have a similar thread about this in the CID forums. I'm willing to have more discussion there too, or on the video notes when this posts. So again, thank you all for watching, and we will see you next time.